today is quite special because and I'm going to read this, the Security Community Network is the official safety and security organization for the Jewish community in North America, partnering with Jewish federations, synagogues, schools, agencies, and law enforcement to help communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from security threats across all 50 states, and working with over 13,300 institutions across North America. We're fortunate to have with us today the person who has led this effort nationally for nearly a decade. It's my privilege shortly to introduce Michael Masters, but first let me tell you a little bit about him. As National Director and CEO of the SCN, Michael has helped shape the way Jewish communities across North America approach security, preparedness, intelligence sharing, and partnerships with local, state, and federal law enforcement. Michael is widely recognized as one of our nation's leading experts on homeland security, terrorism, anti-Semitism, targeted violence, and the security challenges facing the Jewish communities today, which are unfortunately huge. His experience is truly exceptional. Before leading this group, Michael served as Chief of Staff for the Chicago Police Department, Executive Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for Cook County, Illinois, and as an officer in the United States Marine Corps, attaining the rank of captain. His academic credentials are equally impressive. He's both a Harry S. Truman Scholar and a Gates Cambridge Scholar. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, master's in international relations from University of Cambridge, and his Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School, where he served as managing editor of the Harvard International Law Journal. I don't know anybody who I could have just said that about. That's pretty damn impressive. Gotta have lawyers. Michael is a recognized expert on issues of security, terrorism, and of course anti-Semitism. He served on both the Homeland Security Advisory Council as well as the Faith-Based Security Advisory Council appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, and was the only individual in the country to hold both appointments to both councils concurrently. He doesn't have much of a social life. He currently serves on the executive board of the FBI's Chicago Joint Terrorism Task Force. He's testified before Congress, advised government leaders at every level, and is regularly called upon by national and international media to provide insight. But perhaps most importantly to us, Michael has dedicated his career to helping Jewish communities prepare, respond, and remain resilient while ensuring that Jewish life can continue to flourish. We're honored that he is with us today. Please join me in welcoming Michael Masters.
The best thing is we're live streaming this, so my mother gets to see that. So thank you, Al. It is a real honor and a privilege to be here. I want to thank Alan for the gracious introduction, Dr. Altman. And I also want to thank the rabbi. Thank you, and the Rebbitzin for having us here. It is always a pleasure to be in Aspen and certainly at such a vibrant location supporting Jewish life around our community. I always enjoy being at every Chabad that is always welcoming, but particularly the one here. So just to give you a preview for the next 60 minutes, I'm going to give a brief introduction. I'm going to welcome a few speakers up as well, with some amazing individuals that are working on behalf of our community, that I have the privilege to call colleagues and friends and community members with whom we get to work. And then we'll do some Q&A, and then we're going to open it up to some Q&A. But I want to start just for a moment about the world that we're in right now. The Secure Community Network was created 20 years ago in a very different time to serve as the safety and security organization for the Jewish community. And for 15 years, it was about 4 people and $1 million budget. With that mission, ensure the safety and security of the Jewish community. Roughly 10 years ago, Alan gave me an extra year, it's okay. Roughly 10 years ago, we recognized as a community, and our leadership recognized that the threat dynamic was changing very rapidly. And we saw that on October 27, 2018 in Pittsburgh, and we saw it 6 months to the day in Poway, California at the Chabad there. We have been building an FBI for the Jewish community. And as we teach our children the story of Noah, that when did Noah build the ark? Before it began to rain. We have been working rapidly to build an ark to ensure the safety and security of the Jewish community. But what we're doing is much more than working with law enforcement and making sure there's bollards and window film and phenomenal security guards like we have here at the Chabad in Aspen and coordinating with law enforcement. It is fundamentally about ensuring that our parents will make the decision to send their kids to Jewish camp, that our congregants feel safe walking into shul, that we feel comfortable walking into a Jewish community center. Because the second we as a Jewish community say we're too scared, we're too afraid, we're stepping back, we're stepping down, our adversaries, which have been trying to get us for 3,500 years, and they haven't been successful, that will be the moment when they are successful, when we self-select out of being Jewish and living proud Jewish lives. And it will be also the moment where our democracy in this republic gives up what it is as a religiously free country. Our team is not going to allow that to happen through our work, but we need all of you as well in that mission. So at the Secure Community Network, we are in our command center right now with a team of closely 30 analysts tracking threats and incidents towards the Jewish community. Over 3,500 violent threats in the last 5 days alone. We are the only faith-based entity in the United States that has a direct data feed into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, and we referred 850 threats to life against the Jewish community last year alone. In the pamphlets that you can receive when you came in, you can see it just roughly about 10 of the individuals that we helped get arrested with coordination with law enforcement. We are working to find the bad guys on their doorstep before they make it to our doorstep. And then if they do make it, we are ensuring that our institutions have the physical security and protections that they need, and our community is empowered and trained. We trained over 40,000 members of this community last year. We've conducted training in this Chabad, thanks to the rabbi and his leadership through our team. And we're going to keep working to empower the Jewish community to ensure strong Jewish lives. If any of you have not been trained, your homework amongst the things I'm going to ask you to do today is to get in touch with us to get training. We have had now 2 members of our family involved in mass attacks. One of them was my other half's sister, who was in a school shooting, and the other, with Pam, was our now 11-year-old daughter at the July 4th attack several years ago in Highland Park, Illinois. That's the reality in our country. And hope is not a strategy. So we're going to work to not hope, but to be prepared and empowered and stand strong as a people. We're going to talk about that today, and we'll get more into the details. To start off that conversation, I want to welcome a phenomenal friend and colleague, member of the community, Craig Turk. Craig is an award-winning writer and producer. He is a phenomenal friend to law enforcement, as well as a member of the Jewish community. He created the shows PD True and FBI True, also wrote on a little show called Law & Order. You can all do the theme song. I know everyone knows it. In addition to the show The Good Wife, for those of you that are watching the other side of the television spectrum. Roughly 2.5 years ago, we had gone through the attack in Pittsburgh and Poway. the building collapse in Surfside. We had dealt with an attack in 2006 in Seattle that very few people had remembered. The attack in Overland Park, Kansas at the JCC there. And then the offender drove to the Shalom Village, which was a Jewish senior center, killed 3, none of whom were Jewish. Gives you an idea of the threat. And we started talking about how do we capture these stories? Because each of these stories is significant, from the survivors and those that went through it and those that lived through it, and we wanted to capture them. Craig gave of his time and his creative energy to help us take those testimonials. He's going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to welcome, in addition to Craig, Rochelle Schwartz, who was a member and is a member of the Chabad in Poway, and who went through that event. She's going to share about her experience, and I'm also going to have the pleasure of welcoming my colleague, Phil Niedringhaus, to the stage. Phil is our regional director that oversees the safety and security across the Jewish community in Colorado, as well as the Mountain States. Phil spent 29 years in the FBI, to include being one of the longest serving members in the FBI's undercover program, multiple stints undercover to include roughly 2.5 years undercover in a white supremacist organization that was focused on attacking not just our country, but the Jewish community. And he can share about that experience. He now dedicates his life to ensuring our community and religious freedom and our democracy continues to remain strong. So, Craig, without further ado, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and for having us. I'm particularly happy to be here in Aspen, I think for the obvious reasons that people are happy to be in Aspen, but also because I grew up going to Camp Gan Israel in Orange County, California. And so walking into this building and seeing that sign and knowing that there are young kids who are getting the opportunity to have a great Jewish summer experience is really, it's touching. And it goes to, I think, a lot of what Michael is talking about, which is that, you know, at this point, the ability to live sort of a full and open Jewish life is difficult. It's difficult, but I think it makes it, you know, more important than ever. I want to talk to you a little bit about the project that we've been working on at SCN, trying to put together an oral history of survivors of anti-Semitic violence. You know, Primo Levi distinguished between 2 kinds of survivors. Those for whom memory is a kind of extraneous thing, a painful mass that intruded into their lives, which they have sought to eliminate. And those, like Rochelle, with political or moral conviction, for whom remembering is a duty. They do not want to forget. And even more, they don't want the world to forget, because they've understood that their experience was not meaningless. With Michael and the wonderful team at SCN, I've had the great privilege of working with survivors who have dedicated themselves to making sure that their experiences stand as examples to others, to fellow Jews who need to be trained, to the people who would do us harm, who need to understand that we will not be daunted, and to the people who never saw or who don't remember, who need a reminder that we live in a dangerous moment, but that we will persevere, as we always have. So I'm very proud of this oral history project. I'm sorry that it has to exist. I dread ever having to add to it, but I know how essential it is, because stories are how we make sense of the world around us. I think even, and perhaps especially, when it doesn't seem to make any sense. You know, stories have power. I'm a screenwriter and a producer, and I see this firsthand every day. And while written testimonies are essential to the historical record, being able to see these faces and hear these voices, I think will help people connect to these experiences in the most direct, profound way possible. It's been an emotional undertaking, but I think every nervous moment, every self-conscious pause, every terrible memory revisited has the potential to save countless lives going forward. Moreover, I think they honor the memories of people who couldn't tell their own stories. They do the work that those men and women could have done. And I have to tell you, an amazing thing happened when SCN brought together this group of survivors. It's men and women, young and less young, Jews and non-Jews. There was a bond that may initially have been born of trauma, but now I think is born of much more hopeful connections. Shared coping strategies, but also shared recipes, the most bittersweet memories, but also real hope for the future. And that's because this power that stories have, it's not limited to the people hearing them. Stories also have power to the people telling them. It takes tremendous courage, I think, for our survivors to have participated. And hopefully by witnessing their own courage, we've helped them realize how much stronger they've become themselves. So thank you to the survivors for having done this. Thank you to Michael and to SCN for making this possible. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to be here and for understanding why this is so critically important, I think now more than ever. I am truly honored to be a part of this. I'm grateful that we'll have a chance to share these stories tonight.
I've got someone who has a gun, and he listed 2 bombs.
Did you think that at the time that comes that he might actually pull the trigger?
The vulnerability that I think we need to guard against the most is the feeling that it could never happen again.
To think that it can't happen, I've experienced it does happen.
There were a series of shots, and I was standing there and I could see shell casings bouncing across the floor in front of me.
The service starts, we get to the Amidah, and there is an unmistakable sound that a semi-automatic makes when you're loading around. And that's when he started screaming. He has a pistol that he's waving around, and he claims to have a bomb.
I was very scared at the time, thinking, okay, this is probably our last moment.
When I really started to understand that it was a hate crime, that someone on purpose wanted to murder Jews, that it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish, or the target of someone, that if you're at the place where someone thinks they can find who they want to kill, they're going to murder whoever they can.
These are things you read about in the newspaper or you hear about on the radio, and you feel terrible. It's just awful when you learn about it happening to somebody else, but it always happens to someone else. Well, guess what? Sometimes someone else is you.
I think one of the things we learned from survivors is that it can happen anywhere. And you're not going to choose the time or place of the next incident. What we can choose is our preparation.
Little did I ever think that training for what's happening in the Jewish world would come in handy for me in my personal world.
I think everyone should be trained what to do, and then you can relax and enjoy your lives. And when you need it, it will kick in.
When someone wants to do here, we can't stop them. You can only have tools to help minimize the situation.
We started building a community security infrastructure nationally over 20 years ago. Following the attack in Pittsburgh and the attack 6 months to the day in Poway, we made dramatic increases in investments to security. I don't think anyone could have anticipated in this country the events of October 7th. But the resiliency of the community demonstrated, the fact that our institutions stayed open, our summer camps, our day schools, our synagogues, our senior centers, was a demonstration of the investment that we had made in security. But the fundamental infrastructure that has allowed Jewish life to continue was the investment we made the day before.
It was the worst day of my life, but I have my life. When I went back to the synagogue following Shabbat, I had no apprehension. I felt totally that was the right thing to do, because in my mind, you don't go back, the haters win.
And how do you make people comfortable and confident to go back in? That's usually dependent on the work that you did the day before.
Please join me in welcoming Craig Turk, Rochelle Schwartz, and Philip Niedringhaus to the stage. I'm going to Phil Donahue this a bit, because the stage is small, and Phil is tall.
And I use it pretty loud, so.
Is it on? There we go, great. Rochelle, I'd like to start with you. First of all, I want to thank you for being here and for all the time that you've made. And I also want to thank your husband, Chaim, for letting, not that you had a say in the matter, but for joining us today. Rochelle, can you tell us what gave you the strength to go back to Shul?
Sure.
Push.
It should be green button. Should be already be on.
Sure. I don't The Hebrew word dafka means in spite of, came into my mind immediately. And I knew I had to be back there because otherwise the shooter would have won. It's sort of like what we've been talking about. And I had to be there also for all my friends that were there. They gave me love and support, and I gave to them. So we became a family. And I knew it was important to be back immediately and to continue going. So that's.
Thank you. Thank you for the example that you give to all of us and the strength that you show. Craig, you have developed and produced shows on police officers and FBI agents, people we regularly think of as heroes. What stood out to you with this group that you worked with?
You know, it's a privilege to be able to do what I've done. As Michael said, you know, police officers and FBI agents and special forces soldiers, and I've always been fascinated by their stories because I think, you know, they sort of demonstrate what human beings are capable of at their very best. And when I write about these people, when I try to dramatize what they do, there's always this sort of guiding notion of someone kind of charging forward headlong into a scary or a dangerous or an important situation without thinking about the consequences to themselves. The people that I write about have chosen to do that with their lives. The people that we've been working with here are people who didn't choose to do that. These are people who chose to go to shul, or they chose to go to, you know, a kosher grocery store, or you saw, you know, Mindy speaking. Mindy's not Jewish. She chose to take her, you know, her son to a singing competition at the JCC. And so these people weren't seeking out any of these experiences. And what I've come to understand and come to feel like even more privileged by is the sense that these are the most extraordinary kind of heroes. You know, there's the Shakespeare quote from Twelfth Night, you know, some men are born great and some men achieve greatness and some have greatness thrust upon them. But it takes something incredibly special to react like these people have reacted in this moment. And I think of all the things that I've ever, you know, really had the privilege work on and the people I've had the privilege to work with, this is, I think, the highest honor.
Thank you. Phil, I'm going to turn to you, and I would love for you to talk to us about how your undercover experience in the white supremacist movement has informed your view of the threat environment. But as you lead into that, I would love if you'd be willing to share a little bit about that experience itself, and how it came to impact you and your understanding of who we are dealing with.
That's a lot. So I spent 29 years in the FBI. 25 of that I was involved in the FBI's covert operations or undercover program. When I first got into the program in the mid-1990s, the FBI was doing a lot of the traditional organized crime undercover, drug undercover, public corruption undercover, but we were pretty short on dirty white boys. So I ended up making it through the certification program, and it was on what I would call the short list of white trash for the FBI. I grew up in rural South Dakota, the son of a Lutheran pastor and a school teacher, and now I'm Jewish because I've been here for 6 years, so I've become a little Jewish.
This is Phil's 6-year anniversary, by the way. We're on behalf of the Jewish community.
But some of my first experiences were anti-government groups, and then after the bombings of the Oklahoma City Federal Building, domestic terrorism kind of rose its ugly head or was recognized as a threat to the FBI. So I ended up being the first long-term undercover employee. That's what we call undercover agents, UCEs, undercover employees. I was the first. I got introduced to the Aryan Nation folks and the World Church of the Creator through a source as somebody other than who I was. And that one particular case, I spent 2.5 years going in and out of the Aryan Nation compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho. And there were times that I'd come out of there, I would be away from home for weeks at a time, and I'd call my dad on the phone. And these guys were Christian ideologists. They were out in the Old Testament about hatred for Jews and minorities of all kinds. And I'd call my dad and say, I thought I knew the Bible pretty well, but this is what they're twisting up. And I'll always remember the time my dad told me, our Old Testament is the Jewish Torah. So they're using a Jewish religious book to justify their hate for Jewish people. And that's just literally how twisted they are. So I ended up spending a good chunk of time in the late 90s and early 2000s working white supremacist groups all over this part of the country, in 38 different states. It's everywhere. And then post 9/11, in 2003, I went to FBI headquarters managing the Counterterrorism Division's new undercover program, and we thought we were going to need Arabic speakers and Pashto speakers and Urdu speakers, and what we found out we needed was more dirty white boys. So literally, when the ISIS-motivated attacker that wants to attack a synagogue, they need a gun, they need a bomb, and who do the sources turn into? Dirty white boys. So I spent a lot of time with people that were, Islamic extremists that had hatred for America, but specifically for Israel and Jewish people, and spent time with them, listening to their stories and what they want to do. And it's an honor to work for SCN and continue that work, protecting vulnerable people, whether it's the Jewish community or people in general. But it's truly been an honor to work to continue my career in SCN and take that kind of next step. And it's been a fascinating learning about a lot of different things that I thought I knew that I didn't. So like I said, I've become a little Jewish, but it's been a lot of fun.
I'll just editorialize for a moment. I want to thank Phil. Phil and I get the privilege of going to work every single day with another roughly 130 individuals that have backgrounds from local, state, and federal law enforcement, the majority of whom, 85% of it, are not Jewish, but they are absolutely committed to our community. And the reality is that's infrastructure that we've created now spans across all 50 states. 550 Jewish communities, from the largest Jewish communities in Miami and Chicago to the smallest. I was in Birmingham, Alabama last week with their Jewish community, a community that had a bomb placed outside its synagogue in the late 50s. And that was before the 16th Street bombing of the Baptist Church in the early 60s. We are in a dynamic threat environment that requires this level of professional expertise. And when you hear Phil talk about that interconnected network, that these extremists were going to white supremacists to get their firearms, we're seeing that now. The arrest of Mohammed al-Sadi just now 6 weeks ago in Turkey and his extradition to the United States. This is an individual that from overseas planned 20 attacks, directed attacks that occurred or were planned both in Europe and here in the United States, spanning from New York to LA, to include a plot to assassinate the Jewish daughter of the President of the United States, specifically for that reason. And we know our Iranian adversaries are now working diligently to recruit perpetrators through criminal networks. They're looking to recruit criminal gangs to attack the Jewish community, which is what they're doing in Europe, and we know it's coming here, which is why this infrastructure is so critical. Craig, and again, Phil, thank you. It's an honor to work with individuals like Phil. So, Craig, for you as a storyteller, what's the value of a project like this? I mean, you could be working on a lot of interesting, fun, exciting projects, which you do, but why this, and how can the community best use it?
These are hard stories to tell. And they're hard for the people telling them. But I think for that very reason, they're incredibly important. I think that we live in this era where there's just so much tonnage, right? There's so much news and there's so many things happening, and things that you're upset about today, you're not upset about tomorrow because something else has gone on. And as we roll on, we start to lose things. We start to, we don't remember the way that we should. And so I think the first reason that I want to do this, and I think the priority here is education. There's this old quote that's I think sort of variously attributed to Stalin and Trotsky, but one death is a tragedy, but a million deaths is a statistic. And I fear as Jews we're headed toward the million. One of these stories, Rochelle's story, Haim's story, it's gutting. I mean, it feels almost impossible to recover from, but then on top of that, you put Tree of Life and Colleyville, and the list goes on. And I don't want people to forget. I don't want them ever to be able to forget. And even more so, I think there's been a perversion of the narrative that goes on, where it didn't really happen like that, or we forget who the survivors were, or we forget what the root causes are. And I think that there's something really important for the survivors to participate and for the strength that they've shown to tell these stories, but for us to memorialize them and make them accessible to people so that they don't forget. And so I think the education component of this, to me, feels really important and rewarding, and I think critical for our community. And equally important, I think, is training. This remarkable thing that SCN does, which in certain ways is quite simple, in other ways is maddeningly complex, but run, hide, fight, right? As Michael was saying earlier, everybody needs to do this. Everybody needs to be trained. It is a terrible thing that we have to, in the same way that for all of our children, this notion of doing active shooter drills in schools, which, for anyone who grew up in our generation, it seems sort of crazy, but now kids need to do it. As Jews, we need to do this, and SCN is making it possible. And so I think memorializing these stories and reinforcing, we can help, we can do better, we can protect each other and protect ourselves. My hope is that this project can sort of serve those dual aims.
Thank you. Phil, let me pivot back to you, because you've worked in law enforcement for Jewish Colorado, across now 130 institutions we have across Colorado, as well as nationally. You've seen a bunch of different models of how security can, should not work. What are your thoughts about the model that we've built with respect to Jewish community security here in this country?
I think it's, to be honest, when I went to work for SNC after 29 years in the FBI, and Michael would use the phrase, we're going to build an FBI for the Jewish community. We really have built an FBI for the Jewish community. The collaboration that we have every day, and I'd say, if I had to sum it up in one word, it'd be collaboration. It's collaboration with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners. It's collaboration with Jewish facilities like this beautiful Chabad we're in here. But most importantly, is collaboration with individuals. It's getting those people to trainings, getting people aware of the resources that are necessary to keep their house of worship open and welcoming and safe and secure at the same time. So I think that the collaboration that SCN uses with law enforcement partners, federations, individual organizations, and most importantly, individual Jewish community members. And a lot of that extends to their interfaith partners as well. We do a lot of that work, which I say develops Jewish street cred. When the Jewish security director goes and does a class for a Methodist church that gives the synagogue in Steamboat Springs worship space, that's Jewish street cred. And I think that's important too. But I think collaboration is probably the single most important thing that SCN brings to the safety and security table for the Jewish community.
And that crosses over internationally. That stack of technology that you saw, we're looking at the best and brightest. Phil and I have a particular perspective coming from local and then Homeland Security and the FBI. Counterparts that work in the national security space have a different perspective. We've also brought in a very critical one. We have a partnership with an entity headed by Yossi Cohen, the former head of Mossad, to ensure that that stack of technology we have is the most adaptive, capable, AI-driven stack of technology we have. We know the Iranians are using AI. We know they're fueling it on social media. We're not going to let them catch us off guard. We're going to keep pushing forward and keep them off their best foot as hard as we can. Rochelle, beyond the process of sharing your stories, what else strikes you about the process that you've gone through and coming together, as Craig's indicated in his remarks, about those stories?
Initially, when I was asked to participate, I said no. And I found going to be incredibly therapeutic. Being with other survivors in a setting, knowing what they went through, hearing their stories and how strong they were. We became, one of the members of the group said, we're part of a group that no one wants to be part of. And that was exactly what it was. But it gave me a sense of comfort and therapy in being with this group. And we had very warm and loving people to do this because it was really hard. So I just thought it was very, very valuable. And I was really honored to do it because the stories have to be told. And it reinforced the importance of being trained. We were not trained. We didn't know what to do. And I saw the difference in San Diego of all the communities coming together and being trained at the synagogues, the JCCs, the Jewish day schools. It was powerful. It was powerful, and we need to continue it.
And I'm very proud to say that as of this month, with the addition of 2 communities, our last 2, Chattanooga and Reading, Pennsylvania, we now have 100% security coverage over North America, over the United States, all 550 communities covered by a security professional, and that Iron Dome that we've built to protect this community. So now it's on the rest of us to take advantage of being part of that solution. And as part of that solution, Phil, last question before I open it up to questions, one practical piece of advice that you would give everyone sitting here in this room that they can take with them as they walk out.
Well, my grandma would say wear clean underwear, but I won't say that. I think one of the things that I think about after a 36-year law enforcement career, because I was a deputy sheriff and a state agent in South Dakota before I went to the FBI, but after a 36-year law enforcement career and 6 years with SCN, and the places I've been and the things I've seen and the evil that I've seen, I know what a right-wing extremist or a radical Islamic person is willing to do because of the hate they're fueled by. I know what they're willing to do. My question to the communities that I work with is, well, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to go to training and get trained? Are you willing to take family members and friends to training? Are you willing to get out your checkbook and support an organization like SCN? So it really comes down to what we're all willing to do. The fact that you took time out of your day in Aspen this evening to come to this is showing that you have a willingness to help. But I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. There's people that are out there that are willing to do terrible things, and the question is, what are we willing to do to stop it and to make ourselves safe and our families safe?
Thanks, Bill. I'll give you one more practical one, and then we'll do questions. If our 11-year-old daughter was standing here and I asked her, your head is on a what? Her head is on a swivel. That 11-year-old who's now at camp and having the time of her life knows that when she walks into a room, and if I asked you all to close your eyes right now and tell me where are all the exits, and could you get to them with your eyes closed, she knows how to do that. She also knows, because she's grown up with me, that the exits that lead to the kitchen are probably two of the best ones because there's lots of stuff in there you can use. There's hot water, there's pots, there's pans, but that's a simple thing that each of you can do when you go into a room. Know how you can get in and know how you can get out. And it's not always the way you came in, it's usually not. Questions?
Phil, you've worked with these people, you embedded yourself with these people. What is driving the hate? I get it with the Islamists. They think it's religious-based. But what about white supremacists, the dirty white boys?
Well, I'm the dirty white boys. They're just scumbag white supremacists. But I mean, I think part of it, I think you hit it exactly in the head, that Islamic extremists are generally religious ideology based. There's some of that in the white supremacist movement, but a lot of it is just hate. It's people that want to blame somebody else for their problems. Blame, well, I can't get a good job because blacks get all the good jobs, or the Hispanics get all the good jobs, and the Jews control the banking. They want to blame somebody else for their problems, and I think that's what Richard Butler was the leader of the World Church of the Creator, a very charismatic preacher. And he knew how to push people's buttons to make them feel like they were the ones on the short end of the stick. Buford Burroughs, who was a security guard at the Aryan Nations compound, left one day, drove to Los Angeles, and shot up the JCC and a daycare center there. Thank God nobody was killed. But he knew how to push people's buttons to go out and do bad stuff. Just like the Islamic extremists motivate people now online to go do terrible, hateful things. I think if any of us knew what the real answer was, we could probably make a movie or write a book and be famous. But I think it's just plain old hate and jealousy, and no real explanation for it. But it's nasty.
And the thing that is really causing us concern is the acceleration with these things. Right? If we were having a conversation about Columbine and radicalization 20 years ago, we'd be talking about generally a 12 to 18 month timeline for someone to, from moment of thinking about undertaking an attack to actually becoming radicalized, getting the means, opportunity, methodology to do it. Now we're seeing that process happen in 3 to 6 weeks. And so that is really why, partially, our command center that you saw, we're now building out regional threat centers to replicate that capability in local communities. So we've got one in Ohio in partnership with the federations in Ohio. We've got one in New Jersey that's covering New Jersey, Delaware, and Western New York. We just are opening one in Miami that's covering all of South Florida. We just announced 3 more programs yesterday in Atlanta, Philadelphia, and here in Denver. So we're force multiplying as best we can. Buddy?
Thanks, Michael. Kind of a question for the group. And being a well-known Jewish person in New Orleans, I often have random people come and scream phrases at me. You're supporting genocide. you're a baby killer. And my response is usually just to wave at him and say, thank you. And that drives him nuts. But I just wonder if there's any advice you have, because perhaps I'm not the only one experiencing this, that if someone gets in your face and they're accusing you of some support of Israel, they know you're Jewish, and they scream their favorite phrase at you, what is the advice of this experience group as to how you should react in a situation like that?
That's a good one for you, because
Great question, and it sadly is happening all the time, right? Our Jewish kids on college campuses are experiencing that way too often. As hard as it is, you turn the other cheek and you walk away, which always isn't my first impulse naturally, but I think that's what we need to do. After October 7th happened, and there were a lot of pro-Palestinian protests, we had groups that wanted to do counter-protests, and I didn't want them to do that because it just sets up for a bad situation. And I think the thing to remember is there's nothing you can say that's going to change their mind. There's not a thing you can say that's going to change their mind. So I wouldn't waste my breath and just leave.
You know, like one of them spews, another has a camera right in your face.
Again, I don't want to be in camera engaging with them, so just to turn around and walk away. I mean, and it's really, really hard to do because, again, that's not my natural nature. But there's nothing you can say that's going to change their mind. So just it's better not to engage with them.
You're going to have to suppress your natural litigator instinct.
I would also say for safety issues, you should certainly defer to Phil. For what to do in front of the camera, I will echo Phil's advice, do nothing, right? Because then there's nothing to post. All they're trying to do is get a provocation, something that then they can throw up and look what we did. But if you just kind of look at them and drive by, no one cares, right?
I guarantee we're not going to get to all the questions, so we'll stick around afterwards.
I followed the episode in Poway because I live in San Diego, and I learned that the perpetrator came from a very nice middle-class family. I think he was only 20 years old. He had also done some threats at a mosque nearby. And my question is, can the organization do anything to counteract that?
Michelle, do you want to comment first?
That is correct. He was actually a nursing student, which is a very helpful field. And his parents, he came from a very nice family. But we did find out later that he had been attending a church in Escondido, where the pastor was giving sermons that had influenced him and others. So I really don't know what the solution is, because it was just hatred, but I don't know, but I do know he came.
Organization doing anything at all, say to go online and give a counter program.
Oh, so in terms of counter programming, we're doing a lot of work online. I'm going to be very clear on our mission set as an organization. My interest is identifying, developing evidence, and providing it to law enforcement so they can indict, arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate these individuals. There are many people that want to focus on education. I spent a long time working with fellow colleagues in the Bureau and formerly in the Bureau on counter-extremism work. My candid view is that we spent a lot of money trying to deprogram or unprogram people. I would much rather invest that in Jewish education, Jewish summer camp, and Jewish day schools to give our kids the identity they need to be proud and strong and get these bad guys off the streets and incarcerate them.
I agree.
And one of the things that right now SNC's entered into a working relationship with a Colorado-based organization called the CEL, the Counterterrorism Education Learning Lab, and we are working with them on their online platform to recognize radicalization. Just like you said, ma'am, this kid came from a good family, but he was radicalized. So we want to educate people to spot that when it's happening. The guy that shot up the Boulder King Soopers grocery store had struggled with mental health issues when he was in high school. His family recognized it. He got a gun. The family knew he shouldn't have a gun, so they took it away from him. And then it seemed like he got better, so he got access to the gun again. And then he goes into the grocery store and shoots people. So we want to educate people in recognizing that radicalization when somebody's moving towards possible violence.
I have commentary and then a couple questions. The demographics here are great, but if we don't educate our kids and make them proud, 42% of kids that are under 30 are embarrassed to be Jewish and don't assimilate and think that we are not the victims, we are the cause. And so one of the things we need to do is please have your kids, educate them, and have your grandkids or whatever. That's a commentary. That being said, some of our own enemies are Jews. If I'm correct, the JCC and everybody who threatened all the synagogues at one time was a Jewish person. So it's not just white supremacists. The other comment I have is, why in Hollywood is it so woke that is, no matter what the script is, it's always the dirty white guy that has committed the problem and nobody else has. And I think it perpetuates a lot in your industry, and it, not you, but I'm just saying it perpetuates a lot in the industry, and this is what the young people are looking at, and the social media and everything else, and I don't know how we stop it, and thank you very much.
No, it's true, and we do hear this a lot. You put your finger on something important. I think that there was, 5-7 years ago, maybe a little bit more, a big swing toward trying not to be, stereotyping groups as bad or evil. It's really difficult to do because crimes are committed by the people who commit crimes, and we're not really in the business of, well, X percentage of crimes are committed by this group and by this group. We're just trying to tell good stories. The problem is we work for companies, and those companies are owned by people who have very specific sets of politics. That's changing. I think, I don't know if I would say for better or for worse, but it's changing to become slightly more honest. For a long time we were held to these standards of representation on screen, and how does that work? And, if we represented any particular story on screen, it may look really different than people, might anticipate. And so I think you have identified a real and important problem in scripted entertainment. I think social media is slightly different. But I think it's getting a little better. I would not say I'm fully optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we're beginning to tell stories that more accurately reflect what's going on.
And I think, just to comment on your statement about our kids, I think that's absolutely true. We need to teach our kids to be proud of who they are, proud to be Jewish, whether they're on a high school campus or a college campus. Shortly after October 7th, I got a call one night at home. I was making supper. My son was a senior in high school, and I was talking to this mother who had been to one of my trainings, and her daughter was part of the Jewish youth group at Cherry Creek High School, which is a huge high school in Denver. And her daughter was afraid to go to school the next day because there were kids that were picking on the Jewish kids, with the pro-Palestinian, Gaza stuff. And I talked to her for a while, and I talked to her about having other kids be aware of what she's going through and what her other Jewish friends are going through. And I got done with the conversation, and my son John looked at me and said, "What was that all about?" So I said, "Well, it's a mother of a daughter who's afraid to go to school at Cherry Creek tomorrow because she's Jewish." And John said, "I'll go to Cherry Creek and be Jewish." But he was a member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes group at his high school, and he called his counterpart at Cherry Creek, and they got the FCA boys involved in that. So it's like building those coalitions. Our kids need to learn to build those coalitions to be able to stand up for their faith, whether they're Jewish or Christian. But that's super important. That education piece of our kids can't be overstated. Or our grandkids, for us older people.
And I just want to add something else. I'm a retired teacher, and it's really important as parents and grandparents that you know what your children are being taught in the schools. I don't know what it's like here, but in California we have ethnic studies curriculum that is very anti-Jewish. And it's your role as a parent and a grandparent to really know and advocate and get involved in making sure that what the kids are learning in school is not hatred at all. So that was just an important comment too.
We're going to do 2 quick questions, and we'll stay around, getting to you last, Judge.
Thank you so much. My big question is, where do we get the training? How do our kids and grandkids get trained?
That's an easy one. Good. So one, I'm going to give you I'm giving you my card. You're going to send me an email or text me. I do that too. No Snapchat. That's reserved for our 17-year-old. Or for all of you, you can go on our website. Wherever you live in the country, there's a map there, and you can identify who your security professional is. It's going to be a regional director like Phil, if you're in a smaller community, rural community, if you're in Steamboat or Whitefish, Montana, or it's one of those 140 former members of state, local, federal law enforcement that are hired to best practice standards and are trained how to do their job on behalf of the community. And we're going to connect you with those individuals, and they deliver that training. And all of this is done at no cost because it is supported by philanthropic dollars and donors across the community, because we cannot have dollars be a barrier to security across the Jewish community. Trainings that we offer: situational awareness, head on a swivel, countering active threat, active shooter, but not just shootings, because we see truck rammings and knives all the time. De-escalation training for our security guards, our front receptionists, our volunteers. Guardian training for the people that are working or volunteering in our facilities, so they have a heightened sense of situational awareness. We do training with law enforcement as well. Stop the bleed. 70% of people that die in a mass casualty attack or an event die because they bleed out. So stop the bleed training comes in handy. Phil's son carries a tourniquet everywhere he goes with him. I've got 2 of them in my car, because you're gonna run into a car accident at some point. You never know when you can save somebody's life. All of these trainings and more, it's an extensive training curriculum, and it's part of a process. Josh, we're going to end with you, and then we got a few.
Absolutely. So, Michael, thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for being here today. It's so important. We come from Houston, and we're so fortunate to have a security professional there that has helped stop and prevent very close calls in our community at synagogues, at Jewish day schools, at the JCC. It's vital. I think the one thing that we haven't talked about today is, like, what is the cost of putting this all together, and how can we support you? And then lastly, I think there's a big thing in Congress that I think hopefully will help, but I'd love if you want to touch on that as well.
Sure. Thank you. That was a good last question. So one of the things that we do is we educate, and we spend a lot of time on the Hill. Our team knows it is my favorite place to go is Capitol Hill. A bastion of efficiency at all times. But we are working very closely as a Jewish community, our federation system, the Jewish federations in North America, my colleague Eric Fingerhut, other organizations, the Orthodox Union, and the total sort of alphabet soup of Jewish organizations to advocate for, or educate, if you're on that side of the house, which we are, for a $1 billion funding for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. That grant program, which SCN was on the front lines in 2005 helping to write the legislation, now makes up to $200,000 available for each Jewish institution. This Chabad that we are sitting in has applied for that grant, and many of the security procedures, some that you see, some that you don't, were helped by our federal tax dollars. We want to make sure that we have enough funding, and we're going to keep advocating for that. We're also advocating always for increased funding for law enforcement and the Jewish American Safety Act, which our colleague, one of my colleagues who's sitting here, Dina Weiss, helped work on, to increase funding for Jewish organizations, increase grants to faith-based organizations, and also deal with our education system and a whole host of other issues. That's on the public side. Our community is spending roughly $1 billion on security to protect Jewish lives, to make it possible for Jewish life to exist, for us to feel good about sending kids to camp, to make us feel good about sending kids into a day school or a JCC or walking into a Chabad. It is a Jewish tax. There is zero question. But we cannot afford to not pay that tax. So investing in security, in my mind, is the down payment on a Jewish future. It is just like paying the down payment for your car insurance. Unless someone works for Marsh McLennan in here or another insurance broker, How many of us like paying our the insurance premium? Who loves writing that check? But you can't write the check the day after the incident, right? So that's why we're making the investment. For SCN, it has been a growth from $1.2 million in 2017 to a $35 million budget this year. And we still have more day camps to cover, 850 Hillels, thousands of Jewish institutions, that we need to ensure that every single community, from Dothan, Alabama, and the one conservative synagogue there, all the way to the synagogue in Vermont, has the same training, best practice access to standards, and we need your help to make that happen. We need that security shield to cover every single community. There are pledge cards when you walked in. Grateful for the rabbi for allowing me to go into this pitch. Our Chief Development Officer, Beth Nathanson, is in the back. Every dollar that you give is helping to protect a Jewish community. And what hopefully it's allowing us to do is create the conditions so we can invest more in the number one way to secure our community, which is investing in Jewish education and Jewish camp, in my opinion, as a parent and as a leader in this community. We need your help to make that happen. And if you live here or you're spending time here, please, please contribute to the organizations here, contribute to Jewish Colorado, which is helping Phil and the 2 FBI agents we have working here. If you're living somewhere else, contribute there, and please help us build that national security shield. I want to recognize and thank our board chair, Wendy Berger, 2 of our amazing board members, Linda Maurer and her husband Todd, Adam Green and his wife Dahlia. We are so grateful for all of you and the work that you do to help make our life possible as board members. These are the leaders in our community. Please talk to them, talk to any of us, and please help us keep Jewish life vibrant and alive. We teach our kids the story of Noah and the ark. We've got to build that ark. And we also, if we go to Psalm 122, we think about the guardian, the Shomrim. Behold, the guardian of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. In its intonation, it's about Hashem, right? But there are other guardians. Some of them are men and women like Phil, but the other group is all of you. You make Jewish life possible. You stand guard, you stand up when time comes. Whether it's in your shul, whether it's in your community, you make an investment to help make Jewish life possible. We need security to make that Jewish life possible, so we're asking you as the guardians of Israel to stand up and help us in this work. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening.